Welcome to the Women in Digital Dentistry podcast, where we empower through innovation. I'm Allison Lacusier, your host, and each week we'll explore the mindset and the skill set of creating a successful practice and life for women in business. From the latest in dental technology to mastering marketing strategies, creating team synergy, cultivating a powerful money mindset, this podcast is your resource to empower yourself and your team to have the most success possible. Whether you're an established business professional or just beginning your journey, we're here to help you unlock your full potential, lead with confidence, and have an incredible journey along the way. Welcome to the Women in Digital Dentistry podcast. Welcome to another episode of Women in Digital Dentistry. I am here with truly one of my favorite women in the world, Dr. Maggie Augustyn. Welcome to Women in Digital Dentistry.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. That is a really, really kind introduction right back at you. Every time I see you, my heart just elevates and I can't stop smiling.
I'm so excited for this conversation today. So I want to have people get to know you from our story of friendship, because I think it's a fun one. And it just showcases, I think, part of the brilliance of who you are. So Maggie was one of the keynote speakers at a women's event that I was at. And I remember sitting in the audience being like, oh my gosh, she is so cool. I hope I get to meet her. I hope I get to sit beside her. She's so empowering and inspiring. She's such a good speaker. She's so vulnerable. And she is such a badass clinician. And the more I've gotten to know you, the deeper I've gotten to know the story of your business. But at that baseline, I was inspired, in awe, and just so excited to get to know you. Like immediately, I'm like, she's my soul sister. I hope I get to sit next to her. And then sure enough, the next day we were assigned seating next to each other. We got to spend the whole day together. And I remember we were kind of looking at each other. I was looking at you, you were looking at me, and we were kind of smiling like new friends.
Well, but that wasn't even it. Because the entire meeting, I was doing the same thing about you. I was like, oh my God, there's Allison. And I can't believe she's at this meeting. And I was fawning over you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because I had heard you doing something with an entrepreneur woman, and you were doing a course, and I was in the car, and my husband's like, man, this girl is talking about the same thing that you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, damn right. And you were just so on point about everything that you were teaching in that course. And I'm like, I really, really want to meet her. But I mean, what if she doesn't like me? It was like this kind of like a schoolgirl thing. And then when we got to sit next to one another, that's when the magic happened, right? Because for the first time, that is when the magic happened to me. Because when I looked at you for the first time in my life, and in a very, very deep sense, the relationship that we formed had nothing to do with competition and everything to do with connection and collaboration. We were there to do things together to empower women. It wasn't you versus me.
No.
And that is so often how things are with women, right? When we meet each other, it's like, well, what is she, how is she better than me? How am I better than her? How are we in competition with one another? When we sat down together, it was sisterhood.
Yes, 100%. And pure admiration and gratitude and inspiration for each other and with each
Right.
other, and curiosity. And that is
Yes.
exactly, I love that we started this story, because this is exactly what Women in Digital Dentistry is all about. It's about connecting and being in sisterhood and support, and just holding each other's backs and recognizing we could be doing something similar or the same, and yet we're here just doing it together. It's never a competition. And,
Yeah.
Somebody told me once that you meet somebody and then your impression of them will forever just only go down from there, because you have this perspective of them that's so great that people can only disappoint you. And I remember being like, that's a crazy perspective. But with you, I would say it has been such an extreme opposite, because I met you and I already had this very high regard for you. And the more I got to know you and the more I got to witness your greatness, keynotes on stages, your articles, reading your writing, watching you film videos for Dentalflix. Like we got to do a lot together last year. The greater my respect and admiration of you became, and just the more like there have been so many times, Maggie, I haven't even told you this, so many times where I'm just like, holy smokes, seriously, and in awe of everything that you've done. And so I say this with just absolute love and adoration of you. You are such an inspiring soul. And I'm just so happy that we get to amplify your voice today and have other women get to know you and be inspired by you, because you're just the kind of person that walks in the room and people are better because of it.
I don't know what to do with myself as you're speaking all these things. And I literally teach about how to how to not be humble and how to receive this, and I receive this and I hear you, and I am tremendously grateful for the words that you're speaking in my direction, and they mean so much more because you are just like that. Your energy and your spirit and your positivity, and what you have given to our profession has elevated women, and the things that you've had to endure, as this tremendous soul who is also incredibly beautiful, to get where you have gotten, um, has moved us in the right direction. And I know what it's taken for you to get where you are. So, me being a part of this podcast is a way for me to celebrate where you've gotten, and I hope it's an ability for me to elevate, you and the women that come after us, to give us a voice and an understanding and a connection and the sense that we're not in it alone and we don't have to be in it alone. And most importantly, we're not in competition with one another.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Oh my gosh. I have all the body, like full body goosebumps as we start this.
I'm with you.
So I want to dig in because you are a practice owner. You are one of the most credentialed doctors that I've seen. Like, please go and read her bio. She is incredible. And you have gone through some high highs and low lows of being a business owner, as many, many business owners have. But something that really struck me was when I was learning from you and I was listening through your lecture when we were filming you, you had hit one of the lowest of lows within your business and you were able to get hope back, get traction back, find the tools, find the resources to then go in the completely opposite direction. And at Women in Digital Dentistry, a lot of the female business owners that are in our program, in our community, when they're going through these highs and lows, these inevitable pitfalls and high peaks of being a practice owner, they so often feel alone and then they don't know what to do or how to think about themselves, about what's going on. So can you please just share a part of that story with us and any insight that you could give a practice owner on how to navigate those highs and lows?
Being a practice owner is tremendously isolating. Um, so there was, I I started my practice in 2005, and then my partner joined in 2006. And we bought an HMO practice that was, open 2 days a week, and we grew it to 5 days a week for two doctors. And then we thought it was a great idea to add public aid to that, and it became extremely difficult to keep that profitable. And so 2006 is when we opened it, and 2019 we were just most of the time running with $100 in the bank, and that was $100 to pay our taxes for the corporation, $100 to pay for CE, $100 to pay our team, $100 to pay for supplies, $100 in the bank. There were times that there was negative money in the bank. And what do you do with that? How do you feel about yourself when you have $100 in the bank? How do you make ends meet? What happens? How much fear do you have? And so I ended up writing an article about it and about how we were able to turn that practice around. And one of the most interesting things about that is that when you get to that point, you struggle with finding acceptance for the failure. because there's a fear surrounding the acceptance of having found yourself in a place of failure. So rather than looking and saying, I have failed as a practice owner, you remain in denial and you just continue running that failed practice. And so I continued running that failed practice up to 2019. And so I ended up being diagnosed with cancer in 2018 and went through the rigmarole of that. And so what ended up turning things around for me is when came back in 2019, um, and looked at it and we were $30,000 in credit card debt and had $100 in the bank. And I did not, having gone through cancer, I didn't want to keep living like that. And so that was my reason. But you don't have to go through cancer to face the fear. All you have to do is you have to look around in the community of like-minded people, of like-minded women, of women that aren't in competition with one another, of women that work in communion and that are connected with one another and find inspiration and hope. And that was one of the other things that happened is I started to look at people that I respected, not people that put themselves up on a pedestal, not people that were screaming from the stage, hey, look at me, I'm hot as shit and look at my slides and celebrate me because I put myself here, but people that I truly respected because of their integrity, people that weren't screaming and shouting. And I wanted to get to know them, and they weren't people that lived near me. They were people that I was meeting at conferences. And I asked them to become my mentors. And as I began to develop relationships with them, I started to ask, okay, well, why were they successful? And what could I do to change? And Allison, you know this, sometimes you can't do things on your own. So we ended up hiring a practice coach, and I ended up hiring a life coach. And yes, it cost money for me to do that. And I was very cheap, and I always thought that I could reinvent my wheel, but I couldn't because I was running a failed practice. I was wrong. And so there was a lot of growth that happened. And I ended up, at the time that we were running this practice, I was at $300 an hour in production, and I was working 38 hours clinical per week. This year, I finished the year at 1250 production per hour, and I am working 18 hours a week, chairside. However, um, I'm making a lot more money. I'm taking home 2.5, 3 times more money than I did back then. And there have been moments that life was less stressful. And there have been moments that I have been happier. But last year was grueling. Last year was difficult. And you would have thought that running a really, really successful dental practice, thriving practice, I mean, I took a ton of time off. I took at least a week off every month. I was working chairside 3 days a week, 6 hours. You would have thought that that would have given me some sort of reprieve, but it didn't. So I went from a place of running a failed practice and being exhausted to running a very successful practice and not necessarily being in a much better place emotionally.
What do you think is like the question really is like, what do you think is going to allow you to find that peace? Like, what is your hope or your goal or your move for this year to get you to a place where you feel that sense that you're desiring?
I think we all have to take a minute and figure out what it is that makes us, I mean, happy is a term that we that we use so often. I think you're really going to enjoy this answer. Whatever decision we make and whatever we think makes us happy ultimately is made on account of our ego. I think that when I used to think what made me happy, last year I had an incredible year as a speaker, as an author, as a practice owner. I made more money than I ever did before. I was on bigger stages than I ever did before. I published more than I ever did before. I was on 3 magazine covers. I mean, I did not think I could get there in a lifetime. And all those things happened for me in 1 year. And every single one of those was ego driven, right? They were all accomplishments. And I thought that they would make me happy. And they did. I mean, I'm in disbelief in terms of the gratitude of the people that helped me get there and that recognized me for getting there. But it was all an ego play. I thought, like those were the things that made me look successful, right? Those were the things that made me recognizable. But did they give me peace? Did they feed my soul? Did those things feed me spiritually? They didn't. But what they did do is they introduced me to a lot of people that opened up certain parts of my heart, including you, Allison, that made me more spiritually aware, so that hopefully this year I can find the peace and that spiritual awareness. So I suppose that it's a stepwise process, and the peace that I am hoping to find this year will not have happened without having met the people
Yes.
that I met last year. But there's a lot of hemorrhaging and pleasing of the people around us that we do because we think that we have to do that, especially as women,
Mhm.
at the expense of our own sanity, at the expense of our own sleep, at the expense of our own health. Um, we cater to others, and then we call it success.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. One thing I want to acknowledge you for is your ability to be so vulnerable and so clear on your experiences, because I've learned so much from you just sharing your experience. And I know everyone on this podcast is probably sitting down being like, me too, me too, me too, me too, me too. And that's the point of this. That's the point of this discussion, is that we don't allow people to feel like they're alone in this uncovering. And something I learned last year in my own uncovering is that the mountains, the struggles, the pain that we experience, it really is, and I know this kind of sounds cliche, but I really felt it and realized it for the first time in big ways in 2024. It was that it's all for us. And so you know my story more than most people do. And I know that I couldn't be who I am and where I am today without that journey. Nobody could have told me not to. Nobody could have told you, Maggie, you don't need to be on those stages. You don't need to be on the covers of those magazines. You don't need to make that money. Nobody could tell you otherwise, because this is a journey and life is a journey, and we're meant to experience these things to then realize and understand, oh, that didn't feel the way that I expected it to. What will? How do I? What is that next step? And being able to reflect. And I think that's one of your gifts, truly, is you are so quick to reflect. Like in real time, you're like noticing what's going on around you. You're seeing how you're experiencing it in your body and in your mind. And then you're like, okay, how do I shift and focus on how this is going to be different? And I think that's all we really can do. And so riding these highs and lows and recognizing that the things that we thought would bring us success and joy potentially aren't. And we get to discover and decide what does and what's next for us.
And it's okay to make the wrong choice.
Hmm.
It sucks. And it's okay to make the wrong choice and then to repivot. It's interesting. I can sit here and talk and go back and rethink and re-examine. But man, do I make mistakes? And then do I suffer on account of that? And do I stir in my head? And do I overanalyze? And do I hurt? And do I cry? And I mean, I I probably sound like I have life figured out, and I probably sound like I can explain things pretty well, but I am no different than the rest of us. I'm really not. I life bothers me. I feel like a failure just like everybody else. But the the thing about being alone is I think for a very, very long time, especially myself in dentistry, I felt very alone. And some of it had to do, maybe it was self-induced. Being a woman 20 years ago, being a woman practice owner 20 years ago, you didn't go to like a study club with a bunch of, dudes with a bunch of specialists who were like, yeah, I had a crappy day too. Um, Nobody talked about that stuff. We were all kind of swirling in our own BS, which is didn't talk about it. But and now we're alone. We're just as alone as we were before. I mean, studies show us that the new generations feel more alone than we did, despite the social media, despite the phone, despite the connectiveness. And I don't remember who the interview was that I just saw recently, but the antidote to feeling alone is not just human connection, but the quality of the connection.
Hmm.
So you might not need a lot of friends, right? You might not need three people in your community. You might not need three girlfriends or three guy friends that are dentists. You might just need one really great um, quality connection with a human being. Um, Belong to a community. You might need that one conference that you attend, the women in digital dentistry conference that you look forward to the entire year, because those are your people. And the quality of those connections for however long that conference lasts is what carries you
Hmm.
that entire year. um, And so that's the antidote to the swirling in your head and these false stories that you tell yourself that keep you away from the peace, um, is the human connection. And I think as female dentists, and I know a lot of women are going to be able to connect to this, you're taking your kids off to school. Not a single one of those mom is looking at you. That happened to me. Whether they're threatened by you, whether it's because you didn't bring donuts first thing in the morning because you're running a practice, you just feel left out and it hurts. But what makes up for it is the communities that we can find within our own people
Hmm.
and the quality
Oh
of
my
those
gosh.
connections.
100%. It's interesting this year. I always look at the beginning of a year for like a theme or a kind of a sentiment of how I see part of the way this year will unfold with success. And I really believe that community and connection is is one of the themes that is going to be so critical at this time of our lives in the changes that we're experiencing in the world. And when I say community and connection, it isn't like you said, those like kind of false friends or those like, superficial relationships. It's the relationships where you can hop on a conversation. Like you and I, we haven't spoke with each other for a couple of months and we get on and we're immediately deep diving into how have you been feeling? What have you been shifting? What most proud of? Like we go so deep so quickly. But you know what it takes for us to get there is a deep sense of vulnerability and
Yeah.
a tolerance, I would say, to be seen as you are without needing to sugarcoat anything or
Right.
to pretend like, oh, this was perfect. No, just how are you? How are you really? And be able to share that. And so, kind of just an encouragement to those listening to deeply connect with people. There is a necessity of being seen as you really are. And sometimes I think that's scary and it can feel abnormal, especially if the groups or connections that you've had that haven't facilitated that level of depth and connection. But I want to encourage all of you to talk about the things that are on your mind or in your heart or not working or you want to shift or that you've had a hard time with or keeping you up at night because those are the ways that you no longer feel isolated in your practice.
There's a trust. I'm sitting here in front of you and I trust my soul to you. And I think when you do that, when you open yourself up like that, you will find that the other person will take that and they really will honor that. And they will honor that in a reciprocating manner. I come
Mhm.
here and I trust and I open up my soul to you as well.
Yes. Something that I've been wanting to ask you because we just finished our last live event in Toronto at our headquarters, and the whole topic was on money. And it's interesting because a lot of people, specifically women, have a very hard time talking about money. And not even just the topic of, I have debt or I have been in debt or I don't have enough money to pay my teammates. Like that's one aspect of it. But the other side of it is like, I made a ton of money this year
Mhm.
and I'm super proud of that.
Yeah.
Both of those I find are extremely hard conversations. And I want to understand from your perspective why and how do you get comfortable with it?
I'm still not comfortable with it. Here's the thing. It's a self-worth issue. Um, so many of us have a problem with that. It makes us feel like our self-worth is constantly being negotiated. Um, and it's also a humility thing. So if we say women always want to be liked, okay? So if I'm sitting in a group of people, and if I tell you, hey, I made $600,000 last year, am I going to threaten you? And if you're a guy, what are you going to do to me? And I mean, like, you're not going to hurt me or anything, but how much of a dick are you going to be to me in the next conversation? What are you
Hmm.
going to start saying about me to my colleagues because you didn't make that much money because you made $400,000? What are you going to start thinking about me? Um, I can't possibly be worth it, right? Like, oh, who is she? Why is she so special? Like, how could she
Hmm.
be succeeding more than me? And so I think it's that when we start to name it, right? When you start to say, I made $500,000, immediately it assigns a worth to you.
Hmm.
And then that worth is almost up for negotiation when it comes to other people's opinion, if that makes sense. And I
Hmm.
think that's the barrier that holds us from other people. Whereas for men, when they start to talk about money, it's a manhood measuring contest, right? Mine is bigger than yours. Um, for women, I don't think it's like that. It's if I tell you my number, you're going to prove to me that I'm not worth it.
Hmm.
I know that I remember when we were um, recording for Dental Flicks, and I think in there I said how much money I made, and it was $600,000. And I remember my sister, and I recorded it somewhere else, and I alluded to that, and my sister ended up watching it, and that sucked. I was like, man, now my sister's gonna know how much money I made, and it just now she's going to know. Now she's going to know, and it doesn't feel good. Is that going to make her feel bad about herself? Is she going to now expect me to buy her more expensive gifts? I mean, like there's like all these messages that are connected to it. when it comes
Hmm.
to women. What do you think about that?
It's
That's
true.
what
Like
I
there,
think.
yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of work on kind of like money and energy as a coach and as an individual. And I always am because you're right. Like it can be something that we create a sense of self worth around. And the way that I tried to frame it and then also create a create like a distance from it. Like our money is not our value. It is absolutely not. Money is a tool and it's an energy. And I believe that the more money that we bring in, it means that is how many people we've served. It's like the value that we've brought into the world. And
This is why you
so
hire Allison as your coach. Wow. That is just wow.
And so, like, my goal really, like, it took me a long time to start to see it that way and to believe in it that way, but I do now. And I'm excited for it. Like, I want to make more money because I know the more money I make, the more value I'm bringing to the world, the more I'm giving, the more I'm serving, the more I'm helping. And then the exact same is true for a clinical dentist. You see more patients, you do more procedures, you support more people more efficiently, you make more money. And it's always that way. And so if we can recognize that and recognize that it isn't attached to who we are or our value, it is a tool, it's an energy, then we can actually celebrate it. And then we can get inspired by each other for having it. And so if I'm like Maggie, 600,000 last year, oh my gosh, high five. How are you going to be spending it to celebrate yourself? And I can be there to support you and be excited for you. I think that means a lot. And that's what I want to create within this community. And I want to start changing the narrative around what it really is. Like, I know it's attached to status. I know it's attached to ego. I know it's attached to self worth, but that's only because we haven't healed our money wounds. It's only because we haven't really have seen it for what it really is. It's a transaction of energy, of value, and the more value we can bring into the world, the more that comes back to us. And so that's where like I want people to talk about it more, and I want people to talk about it in safe spaces where they do feel celebrated because I know how hard you work. I know that you invested in coaches and in your own practice to be able to do these things. And I really believe that's an inspiration for all of us. That's a roadmap for all of us. And so, why wouldn't we celebrate it? And why wouldn't we learn from you because of it?
That is such a beautiful perspective. And even as you're speaking, I'm experiencing this mind shift because before we started recording, I think you're like, what are your goals? And I'm like, to make less money. Because the way that I'm looking at money is it stole my peace, right? I mean, it's just 45 minutes in, and like my head is all turned around. I love this.
Yes, I don't think that your money has to be attached to your time. And I don't think it will, it does not have to steal your peace. It does not.
You're right. I'm blaming the wrong thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me getting coached as a guest on a podcast.
So what's your real goal for 2025, Maggie? A million with peace, girl. Let's go. Yeah, I really believe in blowing off the lid on what's possible. Let's try it. Let's test it. The more peace you bring in, the more money you make. What if that was true? And the more you were
Yeah,
celebrated truly and genuinely by the people around you that loved you.
mind shift.
Yes.
Very powerful.
If you could give our audience just some of your jewels, some of your learning, some of your lessons as 20 years into your business ownership, being someone who stands on giant stages as a keynote, who has been on the cover of many magazines and for very, very good reason. What can we learn from Maggie this year?
One of the things that I'm learning this week, well, that I'm reminded of this week, is that we all hold such tremendous power. And our power doesn't have to affect hundreds or thousands of people. Um, it can affect the people that are within reach. Um, as a practice owner, I hold the power to change everyone's day here. And the people that work here, the people that I depend on, the people that lift me up, the people that are here for me, my energy affects them. And I have the power to heal. Really, I do. When I come in a crappy mood, when I come in irritated, it changes the dynamic of everything. When I come in and I am unkind in the way that I make a suggestion, um, and see that's the problem. When I lived that last year and I was stretched to the brim as a leader and I made recommendations, I made them in an unkind way because I had nothing left to give, right? Um, and that's partly the reason for what I want to change. As a leader, I can change their days by being kinder and more compassionate and funnier and more loving and change the entire dynamic of what our days are going to be like. I just came back from Vanessa Emerson's expansion, and one of the speakers there talked about a study that was done where kids were taking a test and they were separated into a control group. But one of the groups was told, think about the happiest day of your life right before they took the test. And that group of kids, their scores blew everyone out of the water. How you start your day and the energy that you bring to the day, it changes everything. And so, as a person that interacts with other people, whether it is your spouse or your kid, whether you yourself are an assistant talking to other assistant, a hygienist talking to your peers, an office manager talking to patients, we have such power that lies within us. We can escalate a situation and ruin everybody's day, or we can come to it with compassion and change the entire dynamic. And I really pray that I can hold myself accountable to what I'm saying right now. That's how I want to live out 2025.
Oof, that is powerful. That is so powerful. I I think that that alone, truly, if we even take a piece of that and implement it and think about it on a day-to-day basis, is going to change everything. I love thinking about ripple effects. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's a huge ripple effect. So, so powerful. Maggie, you are brilliant and you are such a joy. And I could spend the entire rest of my day talking to you and learning from you and asking you questions. And I'm just so grateful that this community got to experience you and hear from you. And
Thank you.
I'm so looking forward to seeing what you create this year because I know it will be magical and you'll continue to change the industry and inspire and help so many people. And so I want to thank you for
Thank
just
you.
being who you are and for being a part of our community and giving back to women in all the ways that you do.
You are very welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation and this conversation.
If you want to reach out or if you want people to follow you, tell us where they can find more of you, read about you, read your articles. Where can people find you?
MaggieAugustyn.com is the website. Fairly easily, Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, same thing, Maggie Augustyn. And I am excited to tell you that I just finished writing my first book. It is in the process of being edited and it should come out at some point in the summer.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read
And it
that.
comes with a workbook, so you'll be able
Oh,
to go through all kinds of exercises. Um,
even better. All right, let's start from here. Can you hear me
There
now?
we go.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching this episode of Women in Digital Dentistry. And if this message resonated with you, please let us know. Please share this with anyone in your industry who might be served from learning from Dr. Maggie Augustyn. And please go ahead and just give someone in your industry some support and love as we start this brand new year and continue to grow together. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Women in Digital Dentistry. We hope you found today's discussion inspiring and full of actionable insights to help you thrive in your practice and beyond. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. And if you know someone who would benefit from these conversations, please share this podcast with them. We would love to hear your thoughts and feedback, so feel free to leave us a review or connect with us on social media. Together, we are building a powerful community of women leading the way in digital dentistry. Until next time, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep making a difference in the world of dentistry. Thanks for listening.